RCMP Commissioner, in your own words, sir, an unprecedented announcement that you and others had made on October 14th, and you had said that the violence orchestrated by India has become, quote, a significant threat to public safety in Canada, with well over a dozen credible and imminent threats to life. And Commissioner Duham, on October 14th, you said that you had clear evidence that links officials from the government of India to violent crimes in Canada, but you provided no further details at that time, and you said that you needed to protect the open investigations and court proceedings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at that time, you were of the opinion that those details, if released, could jeopardize the investigation into the murders and other violent acts by India on Canadians and people residing in Canada. Is that correct?
Yes, and I also comment on the evidence that was presented by Deputy Commissioner Flynn in Singapore with Madame Dewey and Mr. Morrison on the schemes or the modus operandi of how the government of India operates.
And Mr. Durant already mentioned this a bit, but you are aware, of course, of the Washington Post article from that same day on October 14th that includes details of this sensitive information that you had chosen not to share because you felt that it would jeopardize the investigation. Is that correct?
Just for clarity, there's a difference with sensitive information under national security chapeau, but this was the information that's in the article. It was more or less some information from the investigations that we're doing.
So you don't feel that the information in the Washington Post, that those details were sensitive in any way?
Not sensitive to national security as it's portrayed as national security sensitive information. It's information part of investigation, which normally we would like to keep within, but sometimes we do release some information.
So normally you would have kept those details private, but they're of course not private anymore.
I would say on occasion we have come up with some information to stimulate certain things when we're investigating. But this one here, again, is not sensitive, as I mentioned, under the national security definition.
Commissioner, why did you choose not to release the information during your press conference that was at the same time released by the Washington Post? Why were those details kept from the public in Canada?
Because I didn't think at that point it was relevant, that specific information. And again, I wasn't part of the conversation with the Washington Post.
And Mr. Rain, you were part of that conversation with the Washington Post. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. And you felt that those details were not sensitive and would not jeopardize any investigation?
So maybe I can share two things. So the information we shared with the journalists over there were not classified. I would like also, and the job of journalists may be better than I do, but journalists have also separate sources. That's something that has to be said. As I said also in my opening remarks, this is someone who has followed India stories many times. And the information that was disclosed in the Washington Post, I think, are also available elsewhere.
You can confirm then that the information about, for example, the Indian Home Affairs Minister and his alleged involvement in these crimes in Canada, that was not released in Canada, however. Can you confirm that? That was only released in the Washington Post, pardon me.
So this is not an information we provided to the journalists.
Pardon me, it was not information you provided?
No.
Who provided that information then to the journalist? You're not sure? But that was not yourself who provided that information, was it?
We did not.
Mr. Morrison, can you comment? Did you provide
Sure.
that information?
The journalist called me and asked me if it was that person. I confirmed it was that person.
Oh, you confirmed. So you did.
This is a journalist who's written extensively on this topic. A journalist that has various sources. He asked me if that was one of the people, and I confirmed that it was.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. In that day, you can confirm, both Mr. Drin and Mr. Morrison, that the Prime Minister did not release these information to the Canadian public, but it was released in the Washington Post, correct?
Released in the Washington Post, yes. I'm just racking my memory for exactly what the Prime Minister said.
Mr. Ray, you advise the Prime Minister on issues of national security and intelligence, correct? You're the top advisor in Canada. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you advise him not to release that information publicly in Canada?
So we worked with the Prime Minister and the different ministers in terms of their public statements. And I think this is what I can say. Like we advised and we review what was going to be the Q&As and the public statement by the Prime Minister and the different ministers.
I'm trying to understand why it is the Washington Post received information when the Deputy Commissioner, or pardon me, the Commissioner, the Prime Minister, the Public Safety Minister, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs did not provide that information to Canada. And in fact, Canadians wouldn't know unless they were able to read the Washington Post. I just find that quite unfair to the Canadian public that details were released in advance to the Washington Post and confirmed, according to Mr. Morrison, to the Washington Post, but not provided to Canada. Don't you find that odd?
The reason why we offered, as I said in my opening remarks, a background interview to the Washington Post was really to make sure that our side of the story will become clearly and be widely spread, especially at the international level. That was the strategy behind the background interview we gave.
Thank you.
Mr. Lloyd, please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with Commissioner Duhem. Were any of the killers, the alleged killers of Mr. Najjar, known to the RCMP before the killings took place in that investigation?
The Najjar case right now is before the courts, and I'm not going to make any comments on the Najjar file as it's before the courts. Disclosure will happen in due course through the judicial process.
But it's been publicly reported that the 4 killers, we have Amandeep Singh, Karen Brar, Karen Preet Singh, Kamal Preet Singh, forgive me if the pronunciation's incorrect, these alleged killers were all temporary residents. Is that the case?
I would have to go back in my notes to confirm that these were all temporary residents. I couldn't answer.
Reported in the news. Can any of the other witnesses comment on that? This has been publicly reported in the Toronto Sun. Was nobody aware at our RCMP services that of any criminal background of these characters before they were allowed to come to Canada?
I'm not saying that no one in the RCMP is not aware. What I'm saying is the matter is before the courts, and we're not going to comment on it.
Well, this has nothing to do with the current investigation, Commissioner, but it has a concern. It has a concern about whether or not our country is prepared to protect our national security. That's what we're talking about today. And if people with criminal backgrounds are coming to our country, being allowed to come to our country through the temporary resident program and possibly through the international student program, that's a serious breach of our national security. And that's our immigration system after 9 years of this Liberal government. In the case of Amandeep Singh, who has been accused of killing Mr. Najjar, were you aware that Amandeep Singh was on bail when the killing took place of Mr. Najjar?
Again, I'd have to go through my notes of the briefing because it happened quite some time ago, and a lot of things have happened since then.
Well, I guess I'll enlighten the committee. As was reported in the Toronto Sun, there was a March 2023 warrant for fleeing police and the dangerous operation of a motor vehicle in Surrey, BC last November. He was pinched on firearms and drug charges in Brampton. He was out on bail at the time of the Peel Region incident. He agreed in Surrey that he wouldn't possess firearms or ammo or get behind the wheel of the car. He made his first court appearance in June 16th of 2023. 2 days later, this is according to the Toronto Sun, Sikh Canadian activist Hardeep Singh Najjar was killed. Why are these dangerous criminals who are here as temporary residents, possibly here as international students, I don't know what educational institution they're attending, why are they allowed to be out on bail? This is like, if we're watching these people, we know they're a threat to national security. Why are they here? Why are they allowed to be out on bail? Why are they allowed to walk Canadian streets?
Chair, the answer to that, I think one is the process of providing them visas or access to entry into Canada. It's best to be posed to IRCC. And if people are released on bail before the courts, that's got nothing to do with the RCMP. It's a judicial process that we operate within.
I think Canadians will be somewhat concerned. We have, many of the lead figures from our national security establishment, and there doesn't appear to be any sort of coordination between Immigration Canada, between our security services, and I'm not getting a lot of confidence today that our national security is being protected in this country under this government when when it appears that our immigration system has been compromised in this case, when it appears that our justice system is being compromised, and these accused killers are being allowed to walk on the street and go after Canadian citizens, particularly Canadian citizens of Sikh background, I think that's deeply concerning to me, and I think that should be a major focus of what this investigation is. What processes did our country have that could have prevented this? Yes, we can talk about briefing foreign media outlets in order to get this information out. We can talk about the fact that the Prime Minister had information on this, but if we're not fixing our systems like our immigration system and our justice system, it's going to allow these very dangerous criminals to walk on our street. How long have you been investigating, Commissioner Duhem, how long have you been investigating Indian foreign interference on Canadian soil?
Oh, I wouldn't be able to provide the committee with an exact date.
It just seems, it just seems to me that this has become an issue very recently, and I suspect it has been a long time issue, but it really seems to have come to a boil in the last few years. Can you tell this committee maybe why this has become an issue in the last few years? It seems to have become a big issue.
Whole question, I would take you back when the director of CSIS, former director David Vigneault, brought to the forefront the immediate risk to Canadians with the ideological motivated violent extremists. That was pretty new to us because it wasn't on the radar. And I would say foreign interference, although it was probably happening way before it came to the forefront like it is right now. But I think it's a phenomenon that we've learned over the years, and it's present more now than what we've seen before because there's probably more intelligence and work being done.
I'm not saying that this has never been an issue and that it only became an issue recently. This has obviously been a serious issue, and so thank you for that.
Thank you.
When you're dealing with national security, sensitive national security information, who can declassify that? Who has the authority to do that?
The owner of the intelligence products. So, for example, let's say you have something that have been published or released.
That's the standard in the intel world. The owner can release it. Now, you are a consumer of that. You don't create your own intel. You're as the national security intelligence advisor to the PM. You're the consumer of intelligence, right?
Right.
So, who did you get to authorize the release? You don't call it sensitive information or it was classified. But I mean, I read the National Post article. I'm telling you what. That's pretty sensitive information, pretty classified information. So someone above you, who the owner of that intel had to give you authority to release that to the Washington Post, did you not?
So as I said many times, we have not shared classified information with the journalists. Maybe I can add that what we discussed with the journalists was exactly what we told all your leaders when we briefed your leaders.
Right. Including Mr. Poilievre.
Including Mr. Poilievre.
Thank you. And again, I don't want to play semantics, but I mean, I would consider some of the information that you told was not made public, would not normally have been made public under different circumstances. Commissioner Duhaime has made that very, very clear. It could impact the criminal investigation and jeopardize the lives of many individuals. Commissioner, you stated very recently, I don't know the exact time, but within the last week or so, that you would have concerns if the 6 diplomats were to be replaced. Does that remain your position?
My comment was that I do have concerns considering how the government of India operates, but I also shared in that same interview that I'm not familiar with the background process that's in place when a diplomat or a consular official is appointed to a country. So perhaps Mr. Morrison would be better placed to explain on the security side or checks.
I was just going to ask Mr. Morrison, do you share those same concerns, and what does that look like for global affairs?
We will continue to let the dust settle, and then there's a lot of dust, and then we will work with our counterparts to ensure that both sides have adequate representation in each other's countries. There's a process of screening where when a country applies to accredit its diplomats, we work as Global Affairs Canada with the security agencies to ensure there's no adverse information. And assuming that's the case, then we accredit new diplomats.
Thank you. And quickly, Commissioner, you had mentioned here just a couple minutes ago about it's reasonable to assume, in fact, it's occurring, that India also experiences violent extremism, differently than we do here. You indicated that that's a reality. Now, is it possible that criminals from Canada are giving direction to operas in India, just like it's alleged to be vice versa to Canada?
I mean, after coming out on October 14th, anything's possible. We can't discount that, but that's the importance of working with our colleagues in India so we can work together and address the people who are involved.